couple of things. Even I remember like not that long ago, even doing the stories where I was speaking into the camera, I was like, oh my god,
it was so funny.
So he's a trained actor, so he's like, yeah, smashes it out. Where I'm like, I need to be by myself. If he's looking at me, I'm like, go away.
you see all the time, like she'll be doing stories and she'll have like wandered off like around the corner of a building, and then I'll notice that she's wandered off, and then so you'll just like see me like frantically running into the back of shot and like going like and like looking at the camera. Like I think there's probably like at least half a dozen of those.
So I'm getting more used to it now, but like it didn't come that natural to me because being on camera was weird, but I'm getting used to it now.
That's Sarah Grogan and Chris Magee, and this is the Yoga Life podcast. Hello, hope you're well and had a good week. This is me, Kevin. I hope you're still you and listening to this podcast, enjoying this podcast, which I'm really grateful that you're taking the time out to tune in every week and hear me chat to new people. Well, today I have a first for the Yoga Life podcast, and that is two guests at once, the duo of Chris Magee and Sarah Grogan. They are both Irish, but they work and teach in London. Chris comes from an acting background, Sarah comes from a stockbroking background, so really different backgrounds, but they both found yoga and they're over here to teach a few workshops in the Yoga Hub. So in this episode we find out a lot more about Sarah and Chris, everything from how Sarah got her Instagram account hacked to how Chris got so flexible. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher and feel free to share the podcast with friends. I really appreciate it. Hey Chris, hey Sarah, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Good. This is my first time having two guests at once.
So it's our first time doing anything like this actually together. So
we've never done one together before. So
yeah, but you did a podcast, didn't you, in the States?
I did.
Or it's an American guy, but in London.
Yes, it's an American podcast, but the guy happened to be in London, so we recorded when he was in London. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is your first time.
It's my first time, yeah.
Okay, but you were saying you've got some audio stuff coming up. Can you talk about that?
Yeah.
I've gone into it straight away.
It's okay. We're both recording next week for a kind of wake up yoga series. So it's for people who are like in bed. They either put their headphones in or turn the stereo on, and we help them get out of bed with some stretching, some guided meditation, pranayama. It's really up to us, but it's like 10 to 15 minute kind of session or flow.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're both going to be in a recording studio next week doing that. So that'd be pretty cool. And this is good practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like an app that you go on your phone, you put it in the morning, and
it's currently in the US, but they're expanding across Europe. So
yeah, so we're in the first wave of the European teachers that they're adding to their schedule, and yeah, it's like morning or evening. So it's like somewhere like in your bedroom, you've got limited space, but you want to do maybe like a little bit of movement or a little bit of pranayama or just like a little meditation thing to either get you ready for your day or to like ease you out of your day to maximize your sleep.
Yeah. Which is actually quite nice because when I found yoga initially, it was through just doing a retreat, and then came back, was still in finance, working like 6:30 a.m. to like 6:30 p.m. and hadn't quite worked out how to fit classes into my day. So I would do kind of 20 minutes of that kind of thing through YouTube videos actually. So I appreciate the market that is there for something like this, for someone who maybe doesn't have confidence to go to a class yet, or just doesn't have the time necessarily every day. So it's like 10-15 minutes and sets them up for the rest of the day.
That's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah.
How did you get in touch? How did you hear about this concept? Did they get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, it was I got introduced through the vice president of Wanderlust, actually. She's a friend of mine that I met through another mutual friend when I was in America a couple of years ago, and yeah, she reached out and she said, hey, like I think you should like meet this person. I think that you'd be really great for this. Do you mind if I put you guys in touch? So yeah, she made the connection, and then we got speaking to Lizzie, who runs the whole thing, and she was like, I really love you guys, like let's get you booked in for some recording when we come to London. So
nice.
There it is.
That's exciting. Cool. So you guys, to give some context, you guys are over to teach some workshops in Yoga Hub, aren't you?
Yep.
We are indeed.
Are you excited?
Very excited.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's going to be my first time teaching in Ireland ever, actually. Because
Yeah.
originally I'm from Northern Ireland, but I've never taught a class here. I've always
Wow.
been based in London whilst I've been a teacher. So yeah, this will be today is my first ever Irish yoga class.
Yeah.
I was here in April teaching at the Yoga Hub. I did a rocket masterclass, and it went well, so they asked me to come back. So I decided, why not bring Chris along with me and do a kind of a trio of workshops rather than just the one. So it's quite exciting. We're doing handstands today, rocket masterclass tomorrow, and then acro together in the afternoon.
And then family stuff afterwards.
Yeah, 5 days off actually.
And in
which is
between a little
needed.
bit as well.
Big Grogan family gathering.
Yeah, because you were saying you're from Offaly, right?
Yeah, from Tullamore. So moved to Dublin though did my final year of school in Dublin in the institute, and then went to UCD, studied economics and finance. So I was in Dublin for like 7 years before I moved to London, and I've been in London for 8 years. Yeah.
Okay. How'd you guys meet?
Through yoga. I just went to one of his classes actually.
Okay.
And then kind of worked out we had a lot of mutual friends in the yoga community, because I was rocket trained, he's also rocket trained.
Right.
And then we just kind of became friends through that, and then it evolved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
Well, we only met actually last October, November. So.
Last October, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And you were saying that before you were a yoga teacher, you're kind of relatively new to yoga. I mean, as in teaching full time.
Yeah, it's like still quite recent. Although it's been a bit of a whirlwind, like since I finished my TT. So I was in finance. I was a stockbroker for 8 years. Did economics and finance. Was kind of good at numbers and maths in school. So never really knew exactly what I wanted to do, but kind of ended up on that journey because people told me I'd be good at it. So I kind of said I'd give myself 2 years, and if I didn't like it, I'd leave. But I ended up doing it for 8, and if I'm fully honest, probably for like the last 4 or 5, I wasn't that happy.
Right.
I actually moved firms a bunch of times, thinking maybe it would be better next time. And the last move I did, so we get gardening leave, which is basically a paid kind of 2 or 3 months off, and I moved jobs that time specifically so I could just do loads of yoga.
Right.
So I went to India, did 2 weeks of Ashtanga, went like to 2 classes a day in London for like a month. And during that time I was like, I'm definitely going to do my TT. It's just a matter of when. And then one of my teachers, he was like, you're ready, just do it. So January 2017, I was like, okay, this is the year, I'm doing it. And I just booked it, I think literally the 3rd of Jan. And then I did it last year. And then halfway through I was like, I'm out, I'm done, I can't do finance anymore, it's just not me, it's not my journey. So yeah, I just went into my boss and I was like, I'm out. So I ended up resigning in August, but having to work till April. So I was effectively doing like kind of 50, 60 hour work week in finance, plus teaching 7 to 10 classes on top for quite a few months, which was exhausting, but like it was amazing because I'd get to the end of the workday and I would be exhausted, just being like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to hold space for like an hour or 2 hours this evening. And the second I would hit the studio, it would be like, it was just, energy would come back and like, I'd just be on it, and I loved it. And there's nothing that ever felt so right for me than being like, yeah, teaching yoga and holding space for 20, 30 people. It's awesome. I love it.
I know what you mean, because I actually find that you spend a lot of time not teaching and you spend a lot of time on your own, but when I teach I actually feel better than when I'm not teaching. If you know, I get such a buzz after teaching a class that I don't get when I'm at home doing my admin.
You don't say.
The admin is the necessary evil.
We probably will be
unfortunately.
accountants if that was if we were like, oh yeah, I get that's such a buzz from doing my receipts. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm leaving yoga, I'm going full-time accounting.
it's so true. Yeah, it's such a good sign when you like, because I think we think about it, we public speak, which most people are terrified of.
Yeah.
That's like such a common fear. And if you're doing it and you enjoy it, that's such a good sign.
But that's an interesting point, actually. We were talking about this only this week, because when I was like, 21, 22, and then kind of coming out of university, public speaking was really scary for me. And even when I started my job in finance, like being a salesperson, a lot of it was actually presenting and presenting ideas. And I found that really hard, actually. But for some reason, when it's yoga, it comes a lot more naturally. Maybe it's because people are kind of not staring at you. They're like in downward dog and their eyes are somewhere else. But yeah, it doesn't... maybe it's just that I'm older and I'm more experienced now as well. That probably
it's also
helps.
connection to what you're talking about. Like, you're not talking about something that's forced upon you. It's not like, oh, hey, like, here I am getting up, delivering content from another source through the medium of me, but needs to be like accessed by you, and it needs to be like approved, or I need to sell you something, or you need to kind of like, you know, it's like, no, I'm here to share something which is authentic and true, like as a quality of me. Like, hey, like, I'm just here to share this with you, and if you like it, cool, and if you don't like it, that's also cool. Like, it's not, you know, it's not, it doesn't require approval as much.
It's true.
Yeah, and you're more connected to it. So I think it's probably a combination of them both. Probably you're a bit more wise than you once were, but also you're just more connected to the
you're really teaching from experience and like feeling the practice in your body, and whereas like when you're pitching a stock to somebody, it's a bit different.
I know, it's funny when you work for because I've worked for someone else before, and you get to a stage where you're saying, our company believes this, our company believes that, and as if like that you believe it as well, because you're obviously have to have buy-in when you're working for someone else. But as you said, Chris, with yoga, you're saying things like, look, I was doing this yesterday, I found if I turn my hand this way, it feels a lot nicer than so it feels more genuine, therefore it's ways to speak, and obviously the audience are a lot nicer than when you're in a boardroom. You know, they're generally more receptive. So but Chris, real jobs, you were saying when we were sitting downstairs having a coffee, you had a real job. Yeah. So what were you doing before you are where you are?
Yeah, so my journey into yoga was I initially moved to London to train as a professional actor. So I came over, I did a degree in professional acting, and whilst I was here, the movement teacher at that college figured out that I had like all these, like this crazy list of injuries, of things that was wrong with my body. And it's like, she was like, how did this happen? And I was like, well, I played rugby for 13 years or 14 years or something. I just like, I just kind of get on with it. And she was like, no. She was like, no more rugby, no more sports, no more lifting weights. Like, you're not allowed to do any of these things. And coming from where I came from, and I lifted weights 3 times a week. I trained 4 times a week. We played on Saturdays. Like, it was just kind of like drilled into me to have that routine all the time. So I had continued that when I moved to London. I just went to the gym and sort of like did, you know, what I was used to doing when I could. And yeah, she was like, you're not allowed to do any of that anymore. Like, you have to do something that like heals your body. She was like, you've got all of these injuries, you have all of this negative tension. Like, I could move my head like completely to the right, but I could move my head maybe only like 3/4 of the way to the left. Like, you could like push it to get to the full range of motion, but I couldn't like control myself into that space. And I said to her, I was like, well, what do you want me to do? And she went, go and do yoga. And I went, well, for how long? And she went, until you get better. And I was like, okay. And then type A personality over here was like, all right, well, if I'm gonna have to do it till I get better, I'm just gonna do it all the time, because then I'll get better faster, and then I'll have to stop doing it, and I can go back to doing what I like to do. So I just went along to like a local gym and did some classes there, and I was terrible for like 6 months. Like, I couldn't, like, mentally I couldn't allow myself to enjoy the process of what was happening. So I made 0 physical improvements whatsoever. Like, all the tension was still there. Like, there was no, I was like, how have I done this for 6 months and my flexibility isn't better, or why does my neck not feel better, or like, but it's basically because I had like a mental block against what was going on. And the first day that I went in with an attitude of like, fuck it, I don't care what happens, is the first day that I fell asleep in Shavasana, and it's the first day that I left the class and I actually felt better. Like, my body felt released. Like, it was a big kind of light bulb moment for me. Fast forward out of that to like working as a professional actor, and obviously a lot of time spent resting when you're not doing professional jobs meant that I had something else to do. So I started working as a PT and as a fitness instructor. So then that quickly like built up, and I was doing like 30 to 40 classes a week of like fitness stuff, and crazy numbers, I know. and then some PT, and then I was training myself on top of that. So I was doing like a 70-hour physical week when you counted all of the classes, all of the clients, and my training myself. And very quickly I started to get all these little niggles coming back again, which was like, oh, like my knee hurts, and oh yeah, that shoulder started to give me a little bit of pain again, and like all the things that I had from years before had started up. And I was like, oh, well, what did I do last time in order to fix this? And I was like, oh, I practiced a lot of yoga. So I was like, great, I'll just work that back into my routine then. And yeah, I started to do yoga again. And then the more I did it, the more I loved it. And I was like, this feels like something that I should probably be able to offer out to my clients and the people that I'm sharing with. Right. Because there's no point in me telling them, oh, this is how you need to move. This is the thing that you need to do to be fit and healthy and well. But I'm not actually doing that thing. So then I started, like, I was like, right, I'm practicing more and more and more. I'm going to go and do my first yoga teacher training just to like add another string to my bow. I had no intention of being a yoga teacher full time. And yeah, then off the back of the first one, just kind of got the bug for it. Had like a real revelation of like, oh wow, like I don't know anything about this. Like I knew all of the sort of anatomy, physiology stuff, but I was like, I left with so many questions off the back of 200 that I was then like, I need to go and do another training. And I just had this thirst for more and more knowledge. And it meant that I've then done a minimum of one extra training a year, every year that I've been a teacher. And
they can be really addictive.
Yeah,
trainings.
I know.
Yeah, very addictive.
As can workshops.
I've been through it already.
Yeah, well, the trainings are slightly more expensive than the workshop. Like, if you're working on a budget, definitely go for workshops rather than trainings all the time. And yeah, they like the more yoga I did, the more yoga I wanted to teach, the less interest I had in teaching sort of like traditional fitness stuff anymore, and I just sort of like segued into yoga being my full-time gig, and 5 years later here we are.
Yeah. And I think with you, it's interesting to talk about playing rugby and not being flexible in your neck and this type of thing, but from your Instagram, particularly your legs dexterity is unbelievable. Has that always been the case?
Nope.
So, like, say when you how you can do splits essentially, and this kind of stuff. Because you're like, if say to look at you, you're a big guy, and when you see doing splits, it looks kind of spectacular because you don't expect that. Mm-hmm. Is that just when did that start? That what I'm trying to say was, were you?
Did I have like a natural inclination towards that flexibility? I think probably. In hindsight, like the shape of my pelvis probably allows me to get a greater range than some people, depending on like obviously like the depth of your ball and socket joint or internal and external rotation and things like that. I tend to have a lot of space there. In terms of the flexibility of the muscles, like no, not at all. Like my hamstrings were tight as anything. Like my half Hanuman, my full Hanuman was like miles off the floor when I started yoga, and it was pretty much all yoga that opened up the back line specifically. When it comes to like a more like a Samakhanasana, like a box split or like a wide seated Upavisa or whatever, that actually came from I fell. I was stretching with an ex-girlfriend of mine who was a dancer when I was in drama school, and we were on this rug on a wooden floor, and I put my hand on the rug to like go down to like stretch, and the rug slipped and I fell into a full box split and I tore my whole right adductor. Yeah, I know.
It's like an advisor.
Like it's like a referral pain, like just saying it takes you back. It all scarred up, like it all tightened up. So if you were to look at me doing like Skandasana, if I did a Skandasana into my right leg with my left leg extended, I was like maybe like 6-7 inches off the floor, and if I did it the other way, I was like 35 inches off the floor. Like it was huge. Like the tension was excruciating, and I had to go and get 12 weeks of physiotherapy to have them massage the scar tissue out of it. And it's when I tell people about the story, I'm like, oh yeah, I had this like quite attractive like physiotherapist come and massage my leg for like she's massaging my inner thigh.
You were probably screaming at the time.
I cried my eyes out for 12 hours of time with her because it was so intensely painful. Like, and my leg was black, like just completely bruised. And it was so bad. I just said, I'm never going to allow something like this to ever happen again. And so what I did was, off the back of it, whenever I had like finished my course and she was like, yep, it's all good, like the muscle should be fine again, I said, right, I need to improve my range, because then that way if I do ever accidentally slip and fall, like nothing can ever happen. So I used to sit at home. This was back in, it was when I was at drama school, but I was at home like one Christmas, and we had like 3 weeks off or 4 weeks off or something. And I distinctly recall every day sitting in my parents' living room, and I put my feet on the end of each end of the sofa, and I just sat there and I watched TV for like 30 or 40 minutes, and then the next day I went back and I just edged myself closer and
Take
closer
up the whole
closer.
couch?
No, on the floor.
Oh, okay.
Sitting on the floor, like facing the edge of the sofa, and just like edged my way in until it got better and better. And I did it for like, I did like 30 or 40 minutes essentially of like, it was like a yin hold every day. Yeah. And that's the thing that really allowed my body to free up and to help that flexibility. So. And
it's like it took that unfortunate event with the rug to happen before to realise, as you said, I don't want to allow this to happen. And I think that, I suppose the moral of the story there is there's no shortcuts towards gaining flexibility. So yes, you know, you can have an advantage in terms of how your bone structure is, but I think a lot of people find that part of yoga, the deep stretching, quite tedious. And I think that's because type A personalities, you want to constantly move. I know that I recently did a yin teacher training with Josh Summers, and I haven't been to a yin class since. It's terrible saying that, but just there aren't many around, but the benefits are massive. I mean, there aren't many yin classes in Dublin, surprisingly.
Start one.
It's also
you could be right.
You know, if you build it, they'll come. If there's like truly, like if there's no yin,
it's very complementary for a yang practice. What you often see in London, actually, because I mainly teach rocket and I practice a lot of rocket, and people do, cause that's kind of one extreme, it's incredibly yang, and then people do yin to kind of find the balance, find the calm.
Did you have any kind of dance background before you started?
Like when I was a kid, I did a bit of gymnastics and a bit of ballet, but like not to the point where like it would have really benefited kind of. So I only found yoga really when I was like 26, 27, which is quite late actually. I remember trying it in university, and I think you find yoga when you need it, and I needed it then. I was like super stressed at work, really wasn't happy, ended up doing this kind of last minute retreat in Spain with a friend, and just kind of fell in love with it because I needed a release, I needed something, and that was what it was for me. And then I literally couldn't touch my toes. Like I have a video of me doing a chaturanga or like a press up, and it's embarrassing. Like I literally fell to the ground. I had zero upper body strength because I was sitting at a desk for like 12 hours a day. I was doing a lot of kind of entertainment stuff in the evenings, and so zero strength and like zero flexibility. And I guess I think people tend to have a journey of either strength or flexibility. You know, it's obviously a combination of both, but usually there's one that tends to be a bit harder. Men often find the strength bit a bit easier, flexibility a bit harder, and it's usually the opposite for women. The flexibility definitely kind of came a bit quicker for me, but like, it actually feels amazing and to see how my strength has kind of come on over the past.
It's quite sensational as well to see that you, like, because your movement practice essentially is yoga and only yoga. Like you don't have a sports or an athletic background to like draw on. So you know, like literally, it's like a like what you see is a product of
just simply yoga. Practice. Like I don't run, I don't do HIIT, I don't do any of that kind of stuff. I do like rocket is cardio. Like you do get your heart rate up, and for me, it's been enough. But even now, I'm still kind of suffering from some of the things that sitting at a desk for that many years, for that many hours a day, like my hip flexors are still incredibly tight. My quads and my glutes don't trigger like they should, because they kind of learn to switch off over time. So I'm still kind of dealing with all of that stuff, but yoga has helped my body so much, and my mind. I think you end up kind of finding it for the physical, and then it becomes so much more.
Definitely. And the point you made about that you only do yoga, you don't have any athletic background. If you're doing the right style of yoga, I think it can give you everything. I mean, we were talking about Dice earlier, and how say the way he teaches a class, he'll do loads of strength, loads of dynamic, loads of mobility movement, end range movement, ballistic stretching, a lot of it is kind of classic gymnastics. And I was talking to Patrick Beach, just name drop, last week, and you know, he was saying that a lot of yoga, it doesn't work for 90% of the people, because you go to, particularly in Ireland, and you'll find this, that we're still at the infancy of yoga. We are still, you go to a 200 hour and you learn very basic stuff. They'll say, like, sometimes don't even teach a headstand, or, you know, because it can be dangerous, all this type of stuff. It's very safe, which is fine, because we're still getting used to yoga here. London is way ahead. But the downside of that is that you're not building much strength. Like, people don't do push-ups, for example, in a class. You won't do chaturanga back to plank. So I started teaching that, and everyone's like, you're going to enjoy my push-ups. Yeah.
We're both very
some gains.
We're both very strength oriented, actually, in the way we teach, because I think a lot of people aren't, actually, and I think it's an incredibly important part of the practice, which sometimes does get neglected.
And I feel like if you don't, the aim of the practice, like, is to find balance in your body, right? And to find balance physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually and whatever else. Like, balance is the overall aim. That's what we want. Like, you don't want to be tight and weak. You want to be strong and you want to be flexible. You don't just want to be flexible, because too much flexibility, then everything gets a little too loose and injury happens. Same, you don't want to get too strong, because too much strength with no flexibility, tightness, restriction, compression, injury. Again, where you don't want to be. So if the aim is to avoid injury, like, you got to find that happy medium. And if you don't work the strength, then you don't notice the benefit of the flexibility. Like, you don't appreciate the flexibility. Like you said, where, like, people are too type A, they don't want to do the long deep holds, the deep stretches. But if we do, like, 25 minutes where I, like, blast your legs, like, if you're doing, like, so many lunges and so many things, and all of a sudden you're like, ugh. Then when you go in, and you have to go in for, you know, and we're like, right, okay, you're doing Hanuman and you're going to do it for 20 breaths. You're like, oh, thank God. Like, you know, it's like, you're like, okay, so I'm actually happy to be, even though this sucks a little bit, at least it's not that other thing that I was doing. Like, my body at least is getting a chance to be passive, to, like, like, to relax into something a little bit more. And I think that people get especially that personality of people, get a greater appreciation of that if you do the strong stuff like we do.
You can actually be still, because as you were saying, it takes a while to be comfortable in Shavasana. So, you know, for the first 6 months or so, you're lying there looking around like, what's everyone else doing? But if you've had a rigorous physical movement practice, and
you're
you
exhausted,
like that, exhausted. But some people that like that type of movement, they need that to find some calmness. And I think long term, in terms of long term health, it's important to evolve your movement practice. You see Dice and Patrick Beach doing end range movement things, and I actually said to Dice in the 200 hours, what would you say if someone said this isn't yoga? Because it doesn't look like yoga. We're doing all these hip mobility routines.
But again, it's like, what is yoga? It's like movement with breath.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I could tell. Sorry, I was just saying, I could tell some people were a bit like, what's this? I've never seen this before.
Well, it's the. I mean, you chip in as well. This is it for me. It's the mindset, like the attitude that comes behind these movements. Because I have a martial arts background as well, and if you look at a lot of martial arts, martial movements and yoga movements are the same thing, different names a lot of the time. You know, Skandasana is a perfect example of that. That's a low drop stance that happens in Tai Chi. It happens in all types of Kung Fu as well. So if they were doing that in China and they were doing it in India, they both saw the benefits, but they come at it from a completely different mindset. So it's the mindset behind the action that you're taking, which allows it to be yogic.
Yeah, it's just being mindful. It's being present in that moment. It's kind of linking the movement with breath. It is an asana. So I think, I agree. It's just a mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're seeing a lot more teachers build that stuff into their yoga practice, because the benefits are quite clear.
I found myself, though, and this is probably due to my inexperience, of being slightly apologetic when I teach this stuff in class. I'll say, we should do this because it's, and I explain it as if it's like sorry to teach you something new, but let's get this out of the way. And I need to stop doing that. I need to accept that I have new knowledge and I'm sharing this, and it comes from credible sources. Not because some people want to come to a class and like, why aren't we just doing sun salutations, our normal things? They don't want to do something new. Sometimes we have that resistance.
A lot of people don't know. So you're the teacher.
Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, yeah, it's so true. And I think also I want to talk to you and kind of slightly change the subject here a little bit. But before we met, I initially contacted Chris, and then I was in touch with you as well, Sarah. But I noticed on your Instagram just a bit. I hadn't seen this before. Your Instagram got hacked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened?
The great hacking scandal.
Was this? Yeah.
We were in Thailand, and I just woke up and I went to. It was just, I think it was a Friday morning, and I went to log in, and it was just gone. And
it was gone.
Yeah, it was just like basically what it said. His account, like deletion requested or something. So I just couldn't get into it, and.
But wasn't it terms? It said.
And then there was a link saying help, so I went in and I pressed the link, and it was just like a big kind of long generic like terms, so it was very unclear as to what happened. So I actually initially contacted Bryony because it was just like a couple of days after we had finished our 300-hour with Bryce, and I was like, this just happened to you, like can you help? And so she said she'd see if she could get in touch with her contact who helped her get her account back.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
We just kind of, I had some friends because Facebook obviously being quite present here in Ireland, I have a lot of friends who work for Facebook, so I contacted them. I asked if they could help, and I think it was just a combination. We went far and wide, and Chris was awesome. He did a bunch of stories and asked if anyone could help, and a few people just came back and they were like, just get everybody to report it, report something's wrong. So I asked everyone I knew, Chris asked everyone he knew, and it's very unclear as to exactly what happened, because it was just back on the Monday or Tuesday. Actually, I woke up again and people were messaging me and they were like, your account is back up, we just checked, we could see it. So it was gone.
So you were able to get the old account back?
Yeah, so
Okay.
in the kind of interim, I was like, okay, this, it was kind of one of those
Prepare for the
moments.
worst case scenario. This may never come back.
It was one of those moments you're like, okay, non-attachment. So I set up a new one, Grogi 2.0. And actually the support was incredible, just like the amount of people that just kind of followed the new account, the amount of people I didn't really know, but like they kind of knew one of us, or we kind of knew of each other, that were like sending messages or reporting or like telling people to kind of go follow me or that kind of stuff. It was incredible. But then on the Monday or Tuesday, like within 4 days or so, it was back, and it wasn't clear as to whether it was just the number of people that reported it or whether it was the kind of friends at Facebook it was obviously on a hard drive somewhere, or it was back.
Because I was thinking about this last night when I was thinking, I'm meeting Sarah and Chris tomorrow, and then I looked at your bio and I seen you got hacked, and to an outside perspective, that could seem like a very trivial thing. If you're someone who has an Instagram account and you like posting pictures of your food or your dog, Instagram is kind of a fun thing. But I think it has to be made clear that like when you're a self-employed person, a yoga teacher, Instagram, okay, you can imagine, think of yourself as, I think of myself as, say, a business. Your business has a marketing department, has an art department that does the posters, flyers, whatever, pictures. Then you have a publicist, maybe, PR department. Instagram is all of that. It's replacing email as well.
For sure, yeah.
I mean, so that's massive that happened to you. It's actually, and it's crazy that and kind of worrying that can happen.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that, you think of. I think I can't remember where I'll have to fact check myself. There's like a source that I heard recently that said that children today don't go to Google to get questions answered that they have, like the way that we would have been like, I need to answer that question, like I'll go and type it into Google or I'll go and look on Wikipedia. They go to Instagram and they search hashtags, or they go to YouTube, and those are the two sources that they go to for their information. And like a lot of the times, like I only teach at one studio when I'm at home in London, But even then, like, people will go to my Instagram to
Find your schedule.
to find the schedule. They won't go to to the studio website, and you teach in like 5 or 6 studios, and so it's the same. So they'll go to her Instagram because they're looking for her specifically rather than.
And actually, the saddest thing in a way was actually the memories, because this past year has been such a big year for me. I've changed my life in so many different ways, you know, changed kind of career path. And I kind of started the yoga Instagram basically a year ago. It was last August. And all of that stuff was gone because I didn't have a backup of all the content, all the pictures, all the comments I'd written, all the stories. And like, we had so many stories from our trip in Thailand as well, which like would have been all gone. So that was one aspect as well. But you're right, like, just it's your main tool to give people information about you. It's not even just selling, it's just like letting people know where you are, what you're up to. Like, I did an inversions workshop back in May. I think it was like literally 2 weeks after I finished my job, and I rented a space, so I didn't go through a studio, so I didn't have the marketing power of a studio. I just put it on Instagram and it sold out, and there was people there who'd never been to my class. They'd just been following me on Instagram. And that was like, for me, that was like kind of one of those moments where I was like, wow, this is so powerful.
Well, what you said, Chris, about the website, I mean, I never check people's websites. Never. I mean, there's a studio, I won't say where, but there's a studio that has a workshop, I know, and it's a person coming over to teach the workshop, but the teacher doesn't have an Instagram account, thinks it's like, not for them, whatever. So they're thinking about, like, will we get anyone to this? Because that's the first thing I check is the Instagram. I like to see, what do they sound like when they're speaking? You know, I don't need to see a big 30-minute video of them teaching. I just want to see, like, do they seem like they're kind of pleasant enough? And can they do some basic, are they sharing value, like whether it be tutorials, or do they look at least like they can do some postures that excite me? And that sounds kind of a little bit superficial, but you have to have something to go off. 100%. It's either that or you're a stranger.
Yeah.
You know? Is it accessible? Is it like inspirational? Is it educational? Does it lend value to me, or else why am I going?
Yeah,
exactly.
And it is really good. Like, so I do tutorials and I do like peak pose sequences on there. And like, sometimes my students come up to me at the end of class and they're like, "Oh my God, I was doing your headstand one and it was really good." And it's just lovely to like know that you're connecting with people even when you're not in like in the room in a studio teaching them.
And I see you're making or on your profile, on your bio, it says about IGTV is kind of something you want to focus on.
Yeah.
I was Bryony said this to us at our 300 hour, that IGTV maybe soon will monetize as well, and it's important to get content there. But yeah, I haven't got around to it. But I think you kind of have to pick one thing. I like the podcasting thing, you know.
And it does. It takes time to like record them, to edit them. But my first couple of things, even I remember like not that long ago, even doing the stories where I was speaking into the camera, I was like, oh my God.
It was so funny.
So he's a trained actor, so he's like, smashes it out. Where I'm like, I need to be by myself. If he's looking at me, I'm like, go away.
you see all the time, like she'll be doing stories and she'll have like wandered off like around the corner of a building, and then I'll notice that she's wandered off, and then so you'll just like see me like frantically running into the back of shot and like going like and like looking at the camera. Like I think there's probably like at least half a dozen of those.
So I'm getting more used to it now, but like it didn't come that natural to me, because actually when my previous job, it was all very much, it was phone based or it was one-to-one, so like being on camera was weird, but I'm getting used to it now. So
but even things like the person looking at the camera, instead of looking at the camera, they look at themselves, so therefore it's like, it's if you imagine you're talking to someone but you're just looking at their chin,
their mouth or something.
It's going to throw them off. And I know what you mean. It takes a bit of getting used to, but it's so personal. Like when you look at someone's story, it's like, oh, that's like they're chatting to me.
Yeah.
I remember being struck by that, because I'm only kind of relatively new to Instagram too. And that's actually what I quite like about the podcasting idea, because the distance between your voice and the person. I mean, people listen to podcasts, they use headphones, they listen in their car.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't let anyone in your car, you know, but yet you're driving in your commute to work and you're listening to this person speaking. It's very intimate.
And people get to know a lot about you, actually.
Maybe too much.
Yeah.
But I think, like for us, the more that we travel as well, and like we're doing a lot of travel teaching. We have a lot of trips coming up. We're going, we'll be back in Thailand for retreats and stuff next year, and I think our ability to share the experiences that we have when we're away, means that when you do go back to your community, that those people feel like they haven't missed you so much.
Yeah.
You know, like we were in Thailand for 8 weeks, and I went back and people were like, that flew by. I can't believe you were there for 2 months.
And people didn't really ask how it was, because they're like, we know how it was because we were following you.
It looked amazing. I loved it when you did this, or when you were here, and you're kind of like, oh, okay. And you know, you start to the beautiful thing. You know, there are a lot of potential downsides to the world becoming more, well, like focused on social media and about kind of like electronic interactions versus like
real interactions.
You know, but one of the beautiful things about it is that we are becoming a global community of like-minded individuals in the sphere of yoga, or you know, whatever it happens to be, and it's then very easy for, you know, we've never met, but it's very easy for you to reach out to me and say, hey, like, I'd love for you to come and do the podcast. This is what I'm about. Here's what I'm sharing, and then I can go and I can have a little look at you, and you can have a little look at me, and it's like, oh, okay, like here's someone that I will probably actually connect with, and we can create something in a morning that's gonna be hopefully of interest to people going forward, right?
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that this audio clip, this 30-40 minute audio clip is going to be there forever. You know? And so, and I said at the end of the podcast, supposed to start, but like, you know, it can always be downloaded, and it can be shared. And I think, as you were saying earlier, Chris, when we were downstairs having a coffee, you know, if you're a yoga teacher, your ability to use your initiative, as you were saying, Sarah, and put yourself out there is so important.
It's so
it's
important.
all down to you.
Yeah.
So
and you can't be shy about it.
No. I mean, there's always awkwardness. I was nervous sitting on the mics here. Like, if you don't get nervous, something's wrong.
Yeah.
You know, you want to get a little bit nervous, or when you call it excitement. But that's a good sign, I think. Yeah, that was about half an hour, because now we're going to go down to the yoga hub.
Do some handstands.
Workshop time, yeah.
Workshop time, yeah,
Handstand
exactly.
time.
Exactly.
Plenty of push-ups for you, my friend.
Yeah. Cool. So thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. Next week I have with me Alison DeMeo. Alison is, or Ali as I call her, is a student that comes to my classes. She is an Ashtangi. She's also an OBGYN, if you don't mind, so a doctor, and a very flexible lady and owner of a cat called Bruce. And what I really find interesting about Ali is she has a massively demanding job, but also she maintains a really impressive yoga practice that she shares with everyone regularly on Instagram. So yeah, next week, Ali, Ashtanga, cats, being bendy, and being a doctor. Tune in. Thanks so much. Leave a review. See you next week.